I put this slide up first just to try to make sure you don't think we only do offices. So we do actually do theatres and libraries and colleges and hotels and art centres and stuff like that. So that's the commercial. This was our first building. We set up in '87, and we almost immediately got a bloody great big building to do at a business park for a developer. And it was 10,000 square meters, 100,000 square feet, really quite a substantial building. And we started here looking at circulation and space diagrams in an anonymous piece of space, put them in front of the developer to say, what kind of building do you want? And he was absolutely astonished. He'd never had an analysis like that put in front of him before, but he opted for the 18-meter wide type of space, which was Stockley Park format, 3 zones, 2 circulation routes implied by the grid for flexibility and all the rest of it. And we went on to try and build the logic of that building into long floor plates of about 75 meters on 2 sides of an atrium, stairs at the end of the circulation routes for escape, a core in the middle and another core near the front, and servicing, which you can see here in red, divided into quarters, which could be reflected in the form of the building on the roof. And what we were trying to say was architecture was not just skin deep. It wasn't just about floor plates. It was a much more integrated thing than that. But at the end of the day, you end up with a plan like that, and the space internally is actually anonymous. The whole object of the exercise for a developer is to make it anonymous. So the circulation as one of the primary ingredients of architecture is almost lost. So we were just wondering how we could do better than that. But anyway, there we are. We finished the building, and it got onto the Sterling Prize list of its day. It was called the Building of the Year thing at the RIBA at the time. And to our astonishment, it got us on the map. And then, of course, the market collapsed, and we were left with almost no work at all. So we were rescued by PowerGen. Now, this, if you remember, was still in the days of the Thatcher government. They were privatizing those terribly run-down central institutions like the Central Electricity Generating Board, who occupied premises like this. This is in Solihull, in a place called Shirley, which is famous for its Chinese restaurant, the Shirley Temple, by the way, which I think is great. Anyway, it had a tall building, it had an east building, a middle building, a west building. It was completely fragmented, and the directors we met in here, for example, had never been into the east building, and all of their buildings were like that, and they were going to rationalize the staff down, divide into National Power and PowerGen, and then National Grid and so on. And we got the job, 4 strong, of building the new building. It just would not happen now. But anyway, there we were.
Nice cars.
Sorry?
Nice cars.
Aren't they just? Well, that just shows it's a true slide, doesn't it? I mean, I dug out the slides this week. We didn't have that scanned. And so I've been scanning slides all week. Anyway, this was the kind of prototypical diagram we started out with them. Because we knew the people who were going to occupy it, just about anyway. Half of them were going to get made redundant, but anyway. And we knew they wanted desks of a certain size. We knew they wanted something which actually fitted a 1.8 meter grid. And we ended up devising this prototypical team space, which was 10.8 across. It had infinite length. It had a certain number of desks, and it had circulation on one side, so it was efficient, but you could have unsolicited conversations, if you wish, to the people at that middle distance away. Deeper than that, the 18 meter deep developer's office, you couldn't do it. You end up with a second circulation route springing up somewhere you didn't want. So if you were concentrating, you could do that here. If you actually wanted to think for a bit, somebody said, hiya, and they have a conversation. Now that was fundamentally different from the buildings they used to occupy before, and it was all about culture change. They had to work in a different way. So we developed that idea, 2 different sites actually, and then we looked at 6 more while they made their minds up. Prototypical floor plate. It was about 40 meters long, 6 or 7 bays or whatever maximum. This one happens to be 5. Circulation on one side, 10.8 meters deep, well, 12 overall if you take it out to here. And then we started adding the environmental dimension, which was for us passionately held idea that we couldn't do in the previous building. So we started saying, well, actually, narrow offices is actually good for ventilation. It's good for daylight. If you solar shade the side where the sun comes in and keep the heat stuff out of the office, like photocopiers and file servers, you can actually have a low-energy office. And they were really interested in that because they produced energy. They didn't mind that 550 people drove to the site every day, but they did want a low-energy building. So this is about an all-electric building, moreover. So we got this idea of a naturally ventilated, benign, heavy thermal mass, opening windows building through right at the beginning, and that's been the foundation of most of our work ever since on sustainability. So we're still talking 1991 here. And then we developed the floor plate to say, well, let's have the span done on the shortest dimension possible, 10.8, which is nice and economical, to make the circulation even more explicit. So you can't just roll that into the anonymous office space like a developer would do. The agents would hate this, incidentally, but we got it through on operational values, which I hope we can come back to at question time. Put the cellular stuff at the end, maybe the hot spots out of the office space, here, and that space was not too daunting. And then we started getting it analysed, and space syntax came into the frame, and we looked at floor plates in buildings where there were parallel floor plates across an atrium. The circulation was always on the north side in that particular site, because that's where the view was. North side into the atrium, and the next floor plate was north side into the woods beyond. And here you can see a drawing of our first coffered ceiling in concrete, showing the circulation looking at the view. And in this diagram, I won't bother with the detail, but it was trying to tell us, actually, the circulation doesn't work very well. You really ought to flip it on the inside if you're serious about operational circulation for such a big building as this. So that's what we did. This is the final building. Here are the typical floor plates that I mentioned just now, with the offices at the end and the hot spots in the middle, actually. Circulation is completely explicit all the way around the atrium, and it really did bind the organisation together. So everybody could meet at the coffee points and stairs. These are not fire stairs, they're open stairs in the middle. And each staircase has a file server room or a copier room or a kitchen point alongside it. So this was like the village pump. And this was the escape stairs stuck on the outside of the building. And the comparison with the developer building is quite graphic, because there are architectural similarities, quite clearly. There's a very ruthless partie of two floor plates across an atrium. But this one has the anonymity of circulation and a deep air-conditioned format. This one is entirely more interesting, but completely contrary to the investment values of this building, which, again, I hope we'll come back to later on. The site was like this. It was actually possible to arrange the building facing the sun on the longest facades, so it's easiest to keep the sun off the facades. We had landscape car park one side and a bit of land left over on the other for landscaping, and a nice approach to the narrow end of the building. And that's what it looked like when we were finishing it off. Here's the plan with the landscaping done on one side, the car park on the other, with a gentle slope, which meant the car parking went right under the building, and it had pilotis on the bottom, so it went right through to the edge of the landscaping on the other side. And then we built it out of the most wonderful mass concrete, done with a traditional type of contractor who employed his own labour on our first design and build contract, which we actually thoroughly enjoyed. And we've used design and build a lot ever since, incidentally. But what a majestic structure compared with the air-conditioned, flat-ceiling prototypes we tend to get in the developer world. And that's what it looked like when we got the photographer along. You know, it's all very nice and clean, nice concrete coffers, which give you the thermal mass that you need to keep the building's temperature stable, lots of solar shading, quite brutal. It was, after all, the middle of a recession, and the directors were saying, don't build a palace, just build us an operational building. And then we went back last week. Unbelievable, they haven't even decorated it. The circulation works perfectly. It's clean, it's tidy, they still use natural ventilation. They've altered the loose furnishings in the atrium to make it more like touchdown spaces and so on. The sun gets in a bit, just as we hoped, on top of the staircases, but they fixed these timber screens, they were sliding screens, because they're slightly difficult to clean, which is a bit irritating, but never mind. It's actually extraordinarily in good shape, and it works really well. They were absolutely thrilled to see us. One or two of the original people still there. And this is what it was like on the north side. I mean, it's not a great slide, because it was a slide. This is where there was a wetlands and some marshes and so on. This is one of the guys standing on a boardwalk. That's the same view last week. Unbelievable. So the transformation of the site is fantastic. And of course, they really do enjoy it. And that's just the landscaping. Now then, let's get this thing rolling again. What we then did was we started transplanting the lessons of that into nearly all subsequent projects that we could think of, because the circulation became an architectural device as well as a social device within the space. So this building was started even before we finished PowerGen, but here's the circulation around the edge of the floor plate, right at the side of the building facing east to the view towards central Edinburgh. And you can see the castle from here. Everybody got a chance to see that view. And it was narrow enough to do natural ventilation or air in the floor. Looks pretty up to date now, actually, I think. Then we did the building almost next door. We won a competition to do that. Much bigger building, 900 people in this, and a circulation run right down the floor plates. Now, there was one criticism of PowerGen that we heard of, which was, it's really good, you can see everybody, you can circulate well, but there's no hiding place. And that was a comment made by member staff. It's interesting how they smartened up. They started wearing better clothes and things like this, because there was so much on view. So in this particular case, we thought, well, hang on, why don't we have the circulation at the ends of the floor plate? And if you really want to lose yourself, go to the back end of the floor plate, or in this atrium, or in this atrium. This is only 6 meters across, so you can speak across it if you want to. So in Scotland, where the regs are different, these are 3 open atriums. These are 2 closed, glazed-in atriums, and then a special restaurant suite, as you can see. More concrete. Works every time. Wessex Water, that was a communal street binding all the floor plates together. You can get lost if you wish at the tail end of the floor plate. Edinburgh University a few years ago, which is a cellular plan, because academics like cellular, apparently. And all the circulation does is go in a loop and you meet at these kind of points where the staircase is, or there's a funny little staircase jumps from one level to another like this. So it's called a wormhole stair, which drops 2 floors. No purpose for it whatsoever other than a bit of fun. And of course, we then extended it to bigger buildings. That's in the city down the road from here. So circulation externally, bringing people together in a particular way. So I won't bore you with the details. But this one here is our second last building to be completed on the Edgware Road. So circulation, the column, all working as one, getting you to the point where everybody meets at the core. Now that is a developer building. It's actually for British Land. And we've persuaded them that the deep space can be divided up and the circulation made explicit in a particular way. And almost last, the building we handed over on Monday is this one for Camden Council, where it's occupied by Camden all the way through. 10 floors of offices with a racetrack that gets you back to the coffee machines and the lifts, of course, but a staircase at the opposite end to make things happen. And underneath the building, incidentally, are 4 floors of swimming pool, library, gym, and council services. It's quite a structure holding that little lot up. But that's just been handed over, so it'll be open to the public next Saturday. Open day on Saturday. And last, absolutely last, what do we do with ourselves? This is our own office. We bought this little complex of buildings and built a new wing around it in 2000, and in 2012 we extended it to the property next door. And so it's got 2 studios over here, one on ground and first, 2 studios over here, ground and first, meeting rooms in the old barn in the middle. I don't know many people that own a barn in EC1, and then an old restaurant which is joined in. Now the thing that brings it together, because it's highly fragmented, is of course the circulation in the middle. The staircase, the coffee point, the place you get a drink, and actually that's where all the chat goes on, the notice boards as well at 2 levels. So it really works, and that's in our own space, and it's been a great investment. So that's enough from me.